Hello, my name is Jennifer Nicolai, and I am the Associate Director of Stewardship and Special Events here at the San Diego Symphony. And welcome to this week's episode of Lunch and Listen. You just had the pleasure of hearing from San Diego Symphony Orchestra's violinist Kenneth Liao, and momentarily you will get to engage in a live Q&A session with Kenneth. At the bottom of your screen is a Q&A box. Here you can submit any questions you might have for him, whether it's about his background and training, what he's been up to during this year away from the hall, and what he's looking forward to as we start to get back out there. Also at the bottom of your screen is a chat box, and here you can submit any thoughts that you have throughout the program. Thank you all for joining us, and a special thank you to our Lunch and Listen sponsors at California Bank and Trust. It is now my pleasure to introduce San Diego Symphony CEO Martha Gilmer.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I'm really excited to introduce to you today Kenneth Liao, one of our more recent additions. Kenneth has just been finishing his second year here with us. So Kenneth, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's very exciting, and of course, you play the violin in the orchestra, and I'm fascinated by many aspects of your biography. You've led a really interesting life.
Thank you.
Coming from Maryland and studying at USC, am I right about that?
Yes.
With Midori.
Yes.
One of the foremost teachers of our time, but also a phenomenal soloist in her own right. So she's dedicated to really making sure music has an important place in the world, in addition. So talk to me a little bit about your time with her.
You know, it was really surprising. I mean, I don't think I could have anticipated any of it going into studying with her. I think not only is she a really dedicated, thorough, and caring teacher, I think she also genuinely believes in everything she does outside of teaching too. And that includes not only performing, but she does a tremendous amount of community engagement. She has 2 nonprofit organizations, along with other various educational programs with schools and youth orchestras around the country. She's a United Nations Messenger of Peace. So she does so much outside of just teaching and performing. And I think the time that I studied with her was very inspiring, you know, even beyond the violin, and just I really look up to her a lot as a role model, and just how much someone could possibly contribute in our field with our abilities. And yeah, I thought it was really amazing.
Yeah, she's really unique in that way. She's many great soloists also teach, but it seems like she's just dedicated herself to this greater cause that music supports, but it's bigger than that.
For sure. I remember, and even when she did teach, I think before I started, I had a concern. Of course, knowing her busy performance and travel schedule, I was wondering, well, you know, there are a lot of soloists who teach, but then they're really only in town to give lessons once every other week or stuff like that. And that ended up not being the case at all. She would always make an effort to come back every week, even if it was just for a day or two. And the lessons weren't just your typical 1-hour lesson. It was always, you know, sometimes she would start teaching from 7 in the morning just to fit in a 2-hour lesson for every student on 2 consecutive days or something like that. And then she would, you know, end her teaching day at like 11 p.m. and then start her own practice then.
Wow.
And at the time, she was also the department chair of the strings department at USC. So she had a lot of other work to be occupied with, but it didn't stop her from caring about every student. So I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, inspiring, really. And reading that, I was thinking just what a unique individual she is. You also studied with David Chan, who's the concertmaster at the Met.
Yes, that's true. That was also really amazing, but in a very different way. I think I really wanted to study with David because he led the career that I was hoping to go into, which is an orchestral career. And so it was quite the contrast from Midori. He's an amazing player and an amazing teacher, but more importantly, I did get to also watch him perform a lot at the Met, and various other chamber music that he did. So that was equally inspiring, but just in different ways.
So when you were studying with, what repertoire did you study that was different with the two of them?
So in my master's degree, I started to take more orchestral auditions. That was the plan. And studying with David, he has such extensive knowledge of both orchestral and operatic music that I thought that was one of the best options for me to pursue. And luckily, the audition had worked out for the master's program. And so with David, he had helped me prepare various orchestral excerpt lists and opera lists, just to get ready for auditions. But I did still play a lot of solo repertoire for him too.
Mm-hmm. And you have a love of opera as well.
I do. Yeah, I did go to quite a few performances at the Met. I remember quite frequently, I would buy standing tickets they have at the back of the hall. And some of those operas would be quite long, but the standing tickets were, I mean, as a student, they were extremely affordable and definitely worth it. And I think I was always just amazed by the musicianship, not only by the orchestra, but by the vocalists and by the acting, and how everything really projected even to the back of the hall.
Well, as a violinist, often having the melody, listening to singers and how they produce the sound and the line has to be a great teaching opportunity as well.
It was, for sure.
So the New World Symphony was your next home.
Yes.
And a number of your colleagues in the orchestra also spent time at New World. New World, of course, headed by Michael Tilson Thomas, and a passion of his to this day, I don't even know how old it is now.
33, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it is, well, why don't you describe it in your own words? What is the experience of New World? What is its mission, and how does it function?
So the New World Symphony functions as the top orchestral academy in this country. There are some others that are also very famous and very successful, like the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. But the New World Symphony, which is based in Miami Beach, Florida, is a program specifically meant for music graduate or music program graduates to further, this practice of preparing. I think originally the purpose was preparing for an orchestral career, but they've since then expanded the mission statement to really just create well-rounded musicians. So whether that means, you do still pursue an orchestral career, or whether that means you develop interest and skill in arts management, or institutional advancement, stuff like that. They really provide every opportunity for you to explore. And the program functions in a way where they award fellowships, usually up to 3 years per musician. They have a full orchestra's worth of fellows. And in addition to, they work as a normal symphony orchestra would. We have several services a week and culminates in a couple performances of a program or two every weekend. So it operates very similarly to how a professional symphony orchestra would work. But in addition to that, you're also involved with a lot of community engagement. And there are a lot of seminars and information sessions about, you know, various other aspects of our industry, like marketing, donor communication, and just a lot of other topics that they want to introduce us to. And I think that's great. It does get a little busy because on top of this, you then have to, you know, you have 3 years to find a job.
Yeah.
But I think it was a very valuable part of my education, and I'm really fortunate that it had worked out for me to be a part of that program.
And were you, did I read it right that you were concertmaster with New World?
Yes, I did perform as concertmaster a few times. The way the program is designed, you know, also depending on, they have like a general orchestra placement audition at the beginning of each season, just to check up to see, you know, how you're playing, how you're sounding. But I think in general, it's a very good program to kind of explore the kind of player you want to head in career-wise. Like if you find you enjoy being in a position of leadership, like a principal position or concertmaster position, or if you'd rather, you know, contribute as a section member, it was a very helpful environment to kind of explore and learn from, you know, various programs and possibly even mistakes.
Yeah. So you were involved in community engagement activities?
Yes, we had a variety of options to choose from. Those who are, you know, more inclined with various social media platforms, for instance, they would do like a talk show on various platforms, or, you know, they would do a lot of online teaching for programs, you know, across the country. New World was very into connecting with institutions all across the country via like a webcam kind of teaching environment. And for those who were a little less inclined for this involvement with technology, which I'm one of them, I'm not super comfortable with, you know, like a Zoom or web meeting kind of a situation, but we would go to local schools quite frequently and, you know, give sectionals, teach lessons. We would go to various social institutions in the county to do performances or, you know, other smaller scaled down programs, educational programs. So it was a very involved program. There was a lot of opportunity to you know, be a part of the environment, or to be a part of the community, and yeah, it was great.
So you worked with a number of guest conductors there, and also soloists that would come through and give master classes. I mean, it really is a laboratory of with a lot of visiting artists as well. What was the
Yeah.
most memorable? Do you remember memorable work in that way?
My gosh, I think my favorite memory, one of my favorite memories must have been when we performed Don Quixote with Yo-Yo Ma and Michael Tilson Thomas. That was an interesting week because we had two rather substantial programs, and Yo-Yo Ma, he of course knows the piece extremely well, but because of his busy touring schedule, he only flew in, I would say, less than 24 hours before the first performance. So we were rehearsing without him. There was another cellist that we had been kind of rehearsing with in the meantime, but I just remember, everyone was just so focused, and yeah, the music making was kind of incredible, how everything came together and how the rest of the performances of different programs kind of came together as well during that week. And he gave a master class during the short time that he was here, actually, which was very generous of him. And that was done in our hall. And actually, parts of it are available on a partnered streaming service that New World has, YSAYE. So part of that is archived and can be viewed there. But yeah, I just remember thinking, not only this might have been the first time I had heard him live, actually, but also the first time I had heard him teach. And I just remember thinking he was this incredibly kind and insightful musician, even beyond the performance.
Yeah, he is incredibly kind and thoughtful, and he has time for everyone. I don't know how he makes that much time in his life, but. And I remember having a conversation with Michael talking about, today we're just going to read overtures, or we're going to read, this kind of piece. I mean, he really wanted sometimes just to have reading sessions to give exposure to certain kinds of repertoire, in addition to the preparation of the concert itself.
Yeah, that's true. He would set aside times whenever he was in town to read through specific repertoire that he wanted us to really think about, and I think try to gain a better understanding of. And he would kind of talk us through various stylistic, advantages and perspectives, and yeah, those were all very valuable and yeah, unforgettable.
So I have two questions from our attendees today. Gordon Broadfear, of course, a great supporter of new music and of chamber music, who you know, and said, I know you're going to want to contribute your gifts again to chamber music. So Gordon's asking if we're going to continue our chamber music program. And yes, we are. And we might wait until after January. We haven't finalized the dates yet, but absolutely. I think chamber music is such an important outlet, or such an important engagement for symphony orchestra musicians to play with each other in small ensembles. And I would be surprised if you didn't agree with that, but.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, and it's definitely something that a lot of us miss doing more regularly. And hopefully with the gradual reopening, we'll get right back into it.
And we have wonderful places to play here in the city, including our recent performances at the Conrad, but it'll be great to return to chamber music again, even though we've been doing a lot of you've been doing some chamber music. People have talked about doing chamber music in their backyards, and of course, more chamber orchestra size works that you've been able to participate in this past year, or more likely the past 8 months.
Yeah, that's true. We're, at the same time, this is kind of a good period of time where we're not, so occupied with a hectic symphony rehearsal schedule, that, for those of us who do feel comfortable around, a certain bubble of people, it is an opportunity to get together. I know the symphony has afforded, in the last several months, there have been some volunteer recording opportunities. I know I did one back in September. Yes, September. And that was at the Conrad, and it was great just to perform with 3 other musicians again. And yeah, there are other organizations around town who are, also trying to put together some small chamber things. So I think it's definitely something that we would love to be doing again soon, more consistently, and definitely something that I think the community appreciates.
For sure. Another question, you mentioned at New World that there's expansion of other career paths. You come in as an orchestral musician, but you look into marketing and so forth. Were some of your colleagues, the question comes from Hal Fusen, were some of your colleagues, did they make other choices? Did they leave behind their performing careers and look at other ways of serving based on the New World approach?
Yes. I mean, during my time there was a cellist who, after he finished his fellowship at New World, he became, I believe, the director of community engagement of the Louisville Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's the CEO of the Chicago Sinfonietta.
Oh yeah, that's right, of course.
Yes. So I think, yeah, there are definitely, and he's a phenomenal cellist, but there are definitely people who go through that program who realize, there are also other ways that, they could really contribute, and it takes a certain kind of personality, to that goes along with that skill set. And I think, comes down to the person. And
Mm-hmm. So the Stradivarius Society, you were a recipient of one of their instruments. Talk to us. That is a great program, a great organization that makes it possible for artists like you to have an incredible instrument for a period of time.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to use a Niccolo Amati violin for quite a few years. I want to say about 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. It was interesting how this kind of panned out. I do know that the foundation and the society, they have a lot of instruments that they're happy to loan out to, big names. Like, I think Joshua Bell might still have one of his instruments, or one of their instruments.
Mm-hmm.
People who are big name soloists and or winners of large competitions. So that does seem to be the trend. Midori actually used to be a recipient of an Amati violin of the society, and And here's a funny story. I think I remember her saying, I think there were only 2 Amatis in their inventory, and she used one of them, and Gil Shaham used the other.
Mm.
But this was many years ago, and so it's funny that I had kind of acquired one of these 2 instruments years later, and it was in really amazing shape, and so I started using it when I was still studying with Midori. I remember she helped to set up like an informal recital process at the Stradivari Society, where they kind of evaluated and made a decision about, you know, an instrument to loan, whether or not they would do it. So this happened kind of early on in undergrad, and I was fortunate enough that it did work out. And so for quite a few years, I had access to this ridiculous instrument, and yeah, I learned a lot from it, and yeah, it was definitely something that I'll remember forever.
Tremendous responsibility as well.
Yeah, very frightening, because it's like carrying a house on your back everywhere you go.
A very nice house.
Yes.
And living in the dorms, I mean, did you have extra security? How did you manage that?
You know, there were times I would leave the instrument in Midori's teaching studio where her instrument was, and it had happened to work out that we were insured by the same insurance. And, yeah, and so I think it kind of made sense to do that.
Yeah.
Because it was covered under, you know, the buildings or the roofs were.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So
which did you have, the Midori or the Gil Shaham, or do you know?
I don't know. I think she speculated at some point. I don't quite remember. Yeah, I think we were a little more certain of this at one point in time, but I can't remember.
So clearly your appetite for learning and curiosity and music and opera and chamber music, but you also really like the bassoon. Is that true?
I do, and it's kind of unusual. I realize it's a little unusual, but it is an interest that I have, and it kind of came out of nowhere. I think in grad school, you know, between the friends that I spent time with at school and the summer festivals that I would attend, I seemed to always just be spending time with bassoonists, and it kind of turned into, oh, Kenneth, do you want to learn how to make a reed? Like a bassoon reed? It's like, oh, Kenneth, do you want to learn how to play a note? Or, you know, and then one thing, you know, kind of built into another. And this continued through New World too. I mean, I had some bassoon friends who, as a joke, they would say, oh, I just made some new reeds. Would you like to help wrap them? Because I think you do it with, some people do it with thread. And then actually, funny story, but when I moved here to San Diego, I actually rented a bassoon from one of our bassoonists, Ryan, because he owns his own woodwind repair shop. And so I rented an instrument from him, and he gave me a short lesson, and looking back, he must have thought, like, who is this kid? But yeah, it's something that I have tremendous respect for and have a lot of interest in. And unfortunately, you know, during the pandemic, when it started, we were a little uncertain of, you know, would I be here for the next undeterminable amount of months? So I actually returned the instrument. But hopefully when things become a little more regular and certain, I'll give it another shot.
It's a complementary sound, but yeah, completely different, which is really kind of fun and fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga, cooking, hiking. Have you sustained all that during this time, and has that been helpful as well?
Yeah, so over the last year, I've made an effort to cook a lot more, to bake a lot more. That's something that I've definitely spent more time than I anticipated. And it's been pretty relaxing, kind
What's
of
your memorable
therapeutic.
baking or memorable cooking?
So I'm on a quest to bake a perfect croissant, which is, you know, it's come out a variety of ways. You know, there have been times where it's been a complete disaster. And there have been times it's turned out well. And so that's my quest, so to speak.
Well, that's an excellent one. Keep going on that.
Yeah, and just, you know, I like to bake birthday cakes for coworkers, and it's just a shame. I mean, there was a period of time after I first started, I think, when we were doing performances and programs at Civic, so like opera or Nutcracker, I would actually bring some baked goods in for people to share. And obviously that's not something that we can quite do anymore. But I always love to bake for friends and for coworkers, and yeah, it's a very, very different skill set than practicing a lot every day. And it's something that hopefully I'll continue to get better at.
Well, I think it's good. It balances life, and that's important as well.
Mhm.
What a pleasure to spend time with you today. Thank you for being with us.
Likewise, thank you for your time.
And I think we have the second movement of the sonata coming
Yes.
afterwards.
Yes.
So just a couple of words to all of you listening. First of all, it is the end of April, and in May, you're going to be hearing from us about several important announcements, including our return to concerts with audience, which is what we're working really hard on right now. And the shell is about to reach, I would say it's at completed status, but there's always something left to be done. And we're at that phase now, but it is where we will return to now. So we'll be outdoors. And interestingly enough, we've been asking a segment of our audience on a regular basis. Every month, we ask them questions about use of, their enjoyment of virtual programming, and is that something they want to continue? And when do they think they'll be ready? Are they going to be ready to come back in person soon? And there are several orchestras participating in this. So you get the aggregate and then you get the individual orchestras. And our public has responded a higher vaccination rate than any of the other orchestras and a higher desire to return to live music. And so we consider that a really encouraging sign. And I suspect all of you listening today are in that category, that we just can't wait to get back. And so it'll be sooner rather than later. We have had such a wonderful time with Lunch and Listen, and it's been great to get to know individuals in the orchestra. And I've talk to you and I get emails from all of you saying how much this has meant to you. And we continue to have these on Symphony Stream, so you can go back and listen again. Next week is going to be our last. We are going to start this segue into live performances. And we have made good headway. I remember when we started, I said, well, we've got 82 musicians, we've got lots of weeks to fill. And we've been so grateful to everybody stepping up. But next week, we're going to have Jeff Thayer, concertmaster of the orchestra. And then we're going to take at least a grand pause as we transition soon into small and then larger and larger groups until we get back to full audience size. So thank you for being with us, and we'll have a grand celebration next week. But we will now leave you with YSAYE, the second movement of his sonata. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Kenneth, and thank you all for watching us for almost an entire year. You have helped to make this program really special. So we will leave you with one last piece, and we'll see you next week when we have Concertmaster Jeff Thayer with us. Have a good rest of your week.